For those that don't know, my name's Dan McHugh, and I'm the programs chair of the Chicago chapter. And we've got an exciting panel for us today. So the chapter is offering 1 CPE credit for the meeting. You must attend the entire session from 4 to 5 to be eligible. And you can request that directly through Susan at info@chicago or at FEIchicago.org. Also, keep an eye out. We're going to send out a program evaluation after the session. So we appreciate, giving us your feedback on that. So also, we're still offering our trial membership, 6-month trial membership for any guests that are joining us today. So welcome, and, keep that in mind and think that through. We're happy to answer any questions as well. You can reach out to us directly. So really, I think that's kind of it for the housekeeping here. I think at this point, I want to take the time to thank our panel and introduce Jon Paul. He's the CFO of Australis Capital, DBA Audacious, and a longtime FEI member that is a friend of a lot of us. So we're happy to welcome Jon here today. And Jon, you can kick it off.
Great. Well, delighted to see everybody, and also glad I flew back down to Las Vegas where we're based. So I dodged the weather there. So we have a great panel for you, and we'll Susan, maybe we'll first do introductions and then we'll do the polling questions. So, why we start out with Leah, and tell us how you got into the cannabis industry. Tell us some about your background and do a quick intro.
Well, obviously, I work at the same place as Jon, and obviously we called ahead and got our colors coordinated. So I'm also at Australis DBA Audacious, which are very long words, but hopefully they're working for us. So I'm Leah Bailey. I'm a consumer products executive. In my past life, I was president of a division of Helen of Troy, which is Revlon hair dryers and things like that. So a whole different industry. Worked in Chicago for many, many years. I'm from here. So worked at Alberto Culver for quite a few years, and Paris Presents up in Gurnee, and then down in El Paso, because what a great move, right? And as I came back, I really was looking for something new and different. And my favorite story is one of my friends said, "Hey, Leah, what do you think about cannabis?" Or marijuana, probably at that time, before we were politically correct. And I said, "God, that's a really strange question, Steve. Why are you asking me?" But the long story short is that he knew about a company in Michigan that had, before Michigan had really gotten off the ground, wanted to start a cannabis business, and they were looking for somebody with a packaged goods background to do it. So I answered the question, well, I'm not the biggest user in the world, but I'm certainly somebody who believes it should be legalized. So that led me to become the first employee of Flourish, which is about the third largest manufacturer of cannabis in Michigan, largest dispensary in Grand Rapids in the state right now. And I did that for about 2.5 years. So we built it from ground up, cornfields south of Ann Arbor, into several 100,000 square feet between there and Grand Rapids. So it's a large operation. I really wanted to get back into Illinois, and I was very excited about what's happening here with social equity. And as most of you maybe have been following, the social equity program in Illinois has been stalled out quite a bit. So my friend Jon, who I went to business school with, called me out of the blue and said, "Hey, Leah," another "Hey, Leah," and told me about Audacious. So I joined almost a year ago, and I am the Chief Business Development Officer. I'm in charge of, I had to bring the marketing with me, of course, marketing, but I also have M&A and regulatory. So those are the things that I spend most of my day on, and I'm real excited to be reunited and working with Jon again.
Okay, yeah, that you finally, there's a big convention in MJ BizCon, they call it. And I remember the first time I was there, and I was going to get a smoothie before, and there was Leah. We're both saying, "What are you doing here in this crazy industry?" Anyway, let's move to Amy. And I think you may already know Amy because she's done some great presentations for LEAD. So Amy, take it from there.
Thank you, Jon. Can you hear me okay? I see many friends on this call, so I'm shouting out to them. I spent 10 years in the finance and accounting consulting world, which is how I got connected, Jon, to you over 20 years ago, or almost. We're so young. It was when we were really young. And I had participated in FEI events in the past when I was at the Johnson Group, a finance and accounting consulting firm. So I've spent most of my career in professional services and in sales and business development. And I love professional services, and I'm back in professional services today. But my long and winding road that led me to the cannabis industry was that I had started a company. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been the earliest employee at some startups, a lot of professional services startups. And I had started a company, we sold it off, and I started doing consulting. And right when I started doing consulting on my own, some business development and sales consulting, and also executive search and recruiting, I got asked to join a project team to help with business development, which I didn't understand what business development was in the cannabis industry until I got into it. A friend of mine has had a small cannabis startup, now a very large one, called Justice Grown in Illinois, and needed help with just a wide variety of things. Knew I could wear many different hats and asked me if I could join the business development team. And what's funny about that is that business development in cannabis is entirely different than business development in like professional services. And so I joined the business development team and started doing license applications. And so that's how I got into the cannabis industry. So I joined a team doing hundreds of license applications in the cannabis industry, and then became the chief revenue officer as well of Justice Grown, and learned a lot. I had not been in, like Allie or Jon or Leah, in the consumer packaged goods or actually selling a product. So it was an incredible experience. And I now am back into the professional services world. I'm actually a recruiter, and my company does recruiting. One of the areas that we do work in is in the cannabis industry. I help hire hundreds of people in the cannabis industry, but we also work in professional services and in technology. But I was in 18 months in a whirlwind, which I know we'll all talk about, in playing many different roles in an MSO, a multi-state operator. So I'm excited to be here back with all my old friends at FEI.
Great. And finally, Allie, tell us about yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Allie. Let's see, my long and winding road to cannabis. Well, I'm a lawyer, and the last full-time job that I had was with a company called Revolution Global, which is a cannabis multi-state operator based here in Chicago. It's probably one of the smallest of the biggest in Chicago. It's still privately held. I went over there and became their general counsel. I was there for 2 years. Prior to that, I was at Groupon. I started at Groupon in 2011 after they had just gone public and were sort of the media darlings of the Today Show and various news outlets that were very excited about Groupon when it first came on the market. And I spent 7.5 years there, culminating with my roles as Deputy General Counsel overseeing global employment. And then I became the Chief Compliance Officer for the company as well. Prior to that, I was with Tribune before Sam Zell, before and during and after Sam Zell came in, and the company started to break apart. But I feel like, I got some good years there where they still owned the Cubs and WGN and LA Times and Newsday and Chicago Tribune. So that was great. And then prior to that, I started my career practicing employment litigation at a law firm called Cypher Shaw that's headquartered here in Chicago. I left Revolution last year in April because I got the entrepreneurial bug. I had spent, prior to that, had really only worked at 3 companies and a law firm. And, I was seeing the wealth generation happening for a lot of the executives that work at these MSOs. And I wanted to do it myself. I wanted to put myself out there and see what I could do on my own. And so since that time, I've been really fortunate to be able to consult and provide legal services and also HR and compliance to a variety of companies, including Audacious. I get to work with Leah, who I adore. And then also started a company called Cannabis with a few other people, including Amy, where we essentially set up licensees, cannabis licensees with service providers. And then I've also put together a team to apply for licenses in New Mexico. And we have pending licenses there, and I'm in the middle of fundraising and pitching all day long, every day, to anyone who will listen. So that's my story. I got the bug, and I think when I left Revolution for a month or so, I thought, gosh, I don't know if I want to do this anymore, because cannabis is a tough industry. And, you know, within a few weeks, I was like, what am I talking about? I love this. And so here I am.
No, we're talking about the wild world of weed. So kind of go around with our panel, and you came into the industry, and what was most surprising to you about the industry that you did not realize going in? Leah, you want to start off?
How about everything? It was amazing to me. I mean, from how difficult it is. I mean, everybody goes, oh, it grows like a weed. Well, it does not grow like a weed if you want it to be good. So the technical aspects of growing really great product and growing not only, you know, high quality, but growing it in an operationally efficient way, so that you actually can make money. And everybody thinks you just can make money in this business, and for various reasons. And Jon will talk about some of the tax issues, but it's not so easy to make money. You have to really know what you're doing. You can lose a whole crop, which is god awful, as you can imagine. The amount of money to see $1 million just kind of go away like that, poof, is difficult. But I was really shocked at just how difficult it is, how much expertise is required. And I think some people think it's an art. And in my opinion, it's really not. It's really something where you have to have SOPs, and you have to know what you're doing, and you have to do it consistently. And so you don't want every person to come in and be an artist about, I'm going to make this or I'm going to make that. You really want to have some consistency once you've developed the right product. And then the only other thing I'll say is, coming from a consumer products background, and the whole way of selling this is so different, because of course, you know, you've got dispensaries, which would be sort of equivalent to retail. There's a little bit of direct to consumer, but not much, depending on the state. But it's night and day. There aren't these large chains where you can go sell Walmart or Target and go out with something that makes sense for everybody. So it's much more difficult. I think it's the most interesting, most difficult industry I've ever been in. And for that reason, I'm sort of with what Allie said. I love it. It's crazy and it drives you nuts, but I really think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Great. Amy, Allie?
Go ahead, Allie. You go first.
Okay.
I'll follow you.
I think the thing that was most surprising to me is, you know, I knew that cannabis companies couldn't work with regular banks. I knew that there was, you know, there were some difficulties there, but I don't think I quite understood how hard it is to run a business when you cannot bank normally, when you cannot get funding normally being from, you know, institutional places. And not just that, but a lot of companies won't work with cannabis companies, law firms. You know, I had a friend at Arnold Recorder, and I went to him and said, hey, you know, you can help me with this, you know, some of this business. And he said, we went through all these steps, and then he comes back to me and says, no, the firm, they won't work with cannabis. Same thing, you know, I was running HR as well as legal. You know, we had inferior HRIS systems, we were on 2 different systems for payroll, for benefits. Everything is sort of the lesser version of what a normal company can use. And as a result, there's been a lot of, you know, ancillary businesses, tech businesses that have sprung up to service cannabis companies, but they're also struggling for the same reason the cannabis companies are struggling, not financially necessarily, but just in terms of where they are with their technology and with their efficiencies and with their funding. Even if they're not plant touching, you know, if they're servicing cannabis companies, a lot of times they have the same problems that the cannabis companies do. So that was what, you know it's going to be hard and you know it's going to be challenging, but you don't necessarily anticipate that the systems you're using and the processes that you that are available to you are also going to put up sort of another roadblock in terms of getting your work done. So that was very surprising to me.
Yeah, we were saying before we got started talking with Dan, said, well, that'll be a great day when PNC get to bank cannabis companies. And Dan said,
Right.
don't hold
Yeah,
your breath.
I
So,
mean-
Dan might say,
No.
Illinois is going to win the national championship in basketball before PNC get to ban cannabis.
Absolutely.
Okay, Dan, we're pulling for you because it would make life a lot easier. Well, I knew my answer would be almost the same as Allie and Leah. And, full disclosure, we're all good friends because one of the many surprising things about cannabis is how few women there are in the cannabis industry, especially at senior levels, which is how the three of us became close because we found an incredible network of senior women that we can rely on. But that's just one of the many surprising things. Because I was more on the business development, again, this confusion of business development and sales being similar to anything that I had done before was one of the many surprises. So I would say everything is surprising and the complexity is both surprising and almost could be overwhelming. The complexity to just, for those of you on the phone, and I have many friends on the phone. So in fact, Otis and I worked very closely together for almost 10 years. And sometimes having worked with so many finance and accounting professionals, I have the auditor in my head talking to me and just the process of following the money, following, how you put an HR system in, talent, everything is complicated. And the business development side, which was I was most involved in, is license application. And both Leah and Allie and Jon, you have too been very involved. And for those of you who think, even just it would be a fun business to get into, the application process is probably the hardest RFP you can ever imagine. That's the only thing I can compare it to. I mean, I probably stayed up for 6 months straight, till midnight working, and both of you have done that too. On these applications, the process is both legal, incredible paperwork, like an RFP answering very involved questions that are, almost so difficult, and you have to score perfectly to even win licenses. So that whole world was I was unaware of how complicated that was going to be. And then the sales process, Allie and Leah talked about that. I had to really learn very quickly about how do you sell through, wholesale and then direct, to a retailer. And that whole process is so complicated because of the state by state regulatory compliance issues. So everything about cannabis is complicated. And now when I recruit, so I'm still in the professionals or back in the professional services world doing recruiting and trying to attract talent to the industry. Some people have an issue. They don't want to work at a cannabis industry. And I'm it's a consumer product, just like anything else. And it's on the rise and it's going to be everywhere. So it's kind of like inventing the new, alcohol beverage category. It's really exciting, but it's not for everybody. And so on the talent side, recruiting, attracting people, while some people are really excited about it, you're not looking for enthusiasts. You're looking for people with talent that fit the role at a cannabis company. And so that makes things sometimes more complicated too. Although I would say people are excited to explore opportunities at a cannabis company, but many of them don't really know what they're getting into. It's not all fun and parties and games. It's a very complex business. So I think complexity would be my one-word answer.
Yeah, I mean, I had no idea what I was getting into. I said, I'd taken the company public before, I can help you out. And then on the way to the airport the next day, flying out to California, and I called a friend in Chicago, and what should I know? He said 280E, and 280E, what's that? I thought 280E was a highway. 280E is the tax regulation where we are taxed on the gross margin. So how many businesses could not survive if they had to pay taxes on gross margins and could not deduct all their SG&A expenses? And we can thank Chicago for a part of that, because I guess a lot of this got triggered by the mob, and the IRS did not like the mob deducting the cost of machine guns. So they said, so it's, extremely burdensome. Yeah, the cash was a big surprise for me. I really,
Yeah.
So at our company, we were first making cash collections from our distributors. So I tap somebody on the shoulder and say, this is your week, Friday afternoon, here's a suitcase. Drive to Oakland in a bad neighborhood, come back with $250,000 and make sure your life insurance is paid up. So it's there's a whole different process for me. So couldn't wait to get to a bank that would service the cannabis industry. But that was a long process to take advantage of it. So, while we hear about, cannabis is starting to become legal across the country. So, now let's say, for example, here, New York State has approved recreational cannabis. So everything happens all at once, right? It's maybe Ellie, you want to talk some about what goes on a state that says it's going to be illegal, but it's still a long process.
Turns over to adult use. Yeah. And, New York's a great example, obviously, and there's a very lengthy process ahead of New York before they get to the place where you can actually go and purchase cannabis at a dispensary there without a medical card. As I said before, I'm knee-deep in New Mexico at the moment. They've also flipped the switch, and starting in July, you were able to consume cannabis without a medical card in New Mexico. But it's not until next April 1st that you'll be able to actually purchase cannabis without a medical card in New Mexico. And, it's interesting. I think that people that are, at any time it's an adult use market, there's always a medical market first, right? So those are the first folks that can get to the market the fastest. And I think it's interesting watching what's going on there. You've got people who are established medical producers who are incredibly excited, obviously, about adult use and ramping up production. And then you've got other folks who are like, I'm out. I'm ready to. It's a great time to sell because it's going adult use. So you see, kind of both. You see some of the operators decide to expand and go for it and want to be, both feet all in on the adult market. And then you have others who are like, it's a great time to sell, but then I'm out. But, the other thing you see, as Jon said before, that's really interesting is that the medical patient count almost always goes up pretty dramatically too when a state flips to adult use, because people start to recognize the taxes and how much higher. I mean, I think in Chicago, I think you can end up with as high as like 40% of your bill being taxed. Because of, there's like the state and the local, and there's different tax rates depending on whether it's flower versus an edible. And by the time they're done layering on all those taxes, you're paying a ton of extra money. So you do usually see the medical patient count also go up because those tax rates are so much lower. I think, Jon, I think it's 1%, right? In Illinois?
Much lower, yeah.
Yeah, so that's an interesting aspect of it. And then I think the other thing is just, depending on whether it's a limited license market state or not, meaning, and when I say limited license, what I mean is they are only going to dole out a couple of licenses or a certain number of licenses in a state. So you do all this work, you put all this time and money and resources into filing an application. It's perfect. First of all, it has to score perfectly to even get into the next step, which is a lottery. So you spend all this time and effort, you've got a perfect application, you go into the lottery, they pick like 5 winners, let's say like in Ohio, and that's it. You're kind of done. And so it's only those folks who get that opportunity to pursue adult use when that happens in a state. And so, you see, it's an interesting, I mean, the revenue, all the revenue goes, through the roof in most of these states, and in the limited license states, the ones that do win in those lotteries stand to make a lot of money. And in unlimited license states, like Oklahoma, for example, which is not adult use yet, but you can see it can get very, very saturated because if there's no barrier to entry, pretty much anybody can file for a license and stand up a retail dispensary. But then the question is, do they have enough inventory to put on their shelves, and do they know what they're doing? Which a lot of folks don't, and then a lot of those businesses don't succeed.
Yeah, so I think of Oklahoma, and that's kind of like one of my probably my toughest day as an auditor at Arthur Anderson. A friend from Dallas called me up and said, I have a cement client in LaSalle, Peru. You want to come out and help me on the physical inventory? Well, first I realized that was going to be going up on silos 10 stories high where you can see across the state of Illinois. And also LaSalle, Peru has more bars per capita. So let's say, I think we finally got to bed about 6 a.m. So after about an hour of sleep and very hungover and going up on silos, that was not my most fun day. So, Leah, tell us about, the community influence, when a state becomes legal, like we saw in Illinois, doesn't mean every town.
It's so important. And one of the things I love about this industry, I was a poli-sci major, and then I got an MBA. So there went anything to do with politics until I got back into cannabis. What's so interesting is that you have to deal with not only the city, sometimes the township, the county. So you think it's all about the state. And of course, it's not federal, right? So it's state by state, as we talked about, but it's also the local jurisdictions. And some of them in New York, for example, have opted out, like, I don't know, 2/3 of the state, I think, if I'm exactly right, but an awful lot have opted out. So then you have to find a locality that will have you. In Illinois, same thing. And usually the ones that want you, and this makes some sense, are places where they need jobs, and they're sometimes more rural, or there's just, on certain parts of Chicago where they really are looking for opportunities for their people. In some of the locations that, for example, I live in Glencoe, and they would not take a dispensary, but yet there's one right in Northbrook. So some of these localities, lose out on the revenue because they're so into not in my town. But as the person who's applying for licenses or who wants to be in the business, you have to really understand that, and you have to work with them. And in many cases, you want to do things that you can for the community. Social equity we've talked about a lot is really important. So you want to make sure that you're employing people that have been disproportionately hurt by the war on drugs, which is important in, I think, every state. In every community, but you also want to make sure you're doing education. You can't do anything with children, of course, because it's a drug. So you can't do that, but you can help in lots of other ways, whether it is helping people with addiction crises or mental health or whatever. And I think that's really one of the things I do love about the cannabis industry, besides, to Amy's point, the people are great. It's not nearly as competitive as any other industry I've ever been in, but it's also a place that most people want to try and give back. So there's definitely making money. There's no two ways about it, but there's also a real element of trying to equalize some of the things that have happened in the past through making money, but then helping the people that have been hurt in the past. So it's really interesting because you really have to know the communities. You have to work with them in order to get whatever hours you want to have and things like that. Adrian, Michigan, I mean, I knew everybody on the city council. I was talking to them nonstop. Same thing with Grand Rapids. You have to know those communities once you're there, and make sure that you're making them happy and you're not smelly and all those things that they don't like to have in their neighborhood. So.
And then we could touch on, talk about social equity, Amy, because that's a big objective. And we certainly have seen that in Illinois. We're trying to do the right thing in Illinois and other states, and be good to, people who have maybe been wrongly incarcerated or others, and try to give them opportunities in the industry. But it needs to be a tough hurdle to overcome.
Yeah, it's been very challenging, specifically in Illinois, because other states don't have. Illinois tried, and hopefully it will turn out okay. We'll see. But Illinois tried really to do it all in their application process. And just to clarify what social equity at least means in Illinois, what it means is the teams that we put together for Justice Grown, and we put dozens and dozens of teams together, in order to get a license, to win a license, you had to have 51% social equity, and we believe correctly, and also veteran ownership. So we reached out to people, and like Leah was just talking about, in communities that were harmed by the war on drugs, people who were wrongly incarcerated. Part of how the founder of the company that I worked for got into this business is he's a civil rights lawyer and helps exonerate wrongly convicted felons. And so many of those people were actually on our license applications because they had been impacted by the war on drugs. They've been impacted by a number of factors. And so they were on these licenses along with veterans. And so what was really cool is we got to know all of these communities. So just to Leah's point, I built a whole Chinatown team and found social equity applicants from that community. And we went to downstate Illinois and the far west and all over the state, finding groups of people that either lived in disproportionately affected areas or were involved. In fact, one of the teams I worked on was Alicia Dewerson. Many of you may know Dave Dewerson he was a Chicago Bear, and he killed himself, and his children were affected. And there's a number of stories that she could tell, she has told, about how her life was impacted. And so she was an applicant on these. So it was incredible to get to know people who want to do well and and give back, and also have been impacted by the war on drugs, by having members of their families with drug addictions. And so I really do hope that Illinois is able to be a shining light when all the litigation clears, to have all these incredible teams that have people who should win licenses, who are exactly what we're looking for, be part of the wealth creation that a couple of people have already talked about. So let's see, we'll see.
So let's say I'm somebody in one of those categories. I want to get into the business. What does it cost? Let's say if I just want to do a dispensary, or may I want to have a grow operation. What's the range of capital somebody needs to get into this business?
You may take that one. John, you'd be really good at that. It's a lot of money, and I think that's what people don't understand. The dispensaries are less money, so those are probably the best place to start. If you're talking about downtown Chicago, you can only imagine, what the lease is, and they see you coming. Oh, you're in cannabis, and if someone has a mortgage, they usually won't let you lease from them because, of course, then their bank will be upset because the FDIC insurance goes away. So finding someone who will lease to you, and then seeing what they do to the prices. And a lot of these guys will lease to like in Ohio, for example, there was just a dispensary lottery. Same person, had, 25 different people so that they could apply under the same location. And then, of course, they were getting the money all the while only one person actually could go on it. So the landlords and the people who have these properties are definitely jacking up the prices. So that's expensive. And then you have to outfit it. And then you have to buy the inventory. So I would say on a dispensary, $3 to $5 million when you're first starting is probably, you have to have the software, and it's very complicated, the security systems. If you're talking about a grow, or even with processing, then I think it's hard to get away with under $10 million. So what's happening in many of these states is that the big companies are the ones that are able to do the cultivation, and then dispensaries do tend to have a little bit better opportunity for social equity. But of course, it's important for social equity applicants to then, like Amy talked about, to partner with people who can help with the funding. But that way, at least in some states, will allow them to sell it as soon as they get the license, and some states won't. Illinois won't. New Jersey will, for example. But either way, the idea is it is creating some intergenerational wealth, but it would be very, very difficult for someone who didn't have cash or didn't have a partner to do any of these businesses, I think. You guys agree?
Yeah, it's really tough. You have at least 51%, you got major capital component, and that knocks out most people. I would love to see if there's some other way where they could be involved, maybe have a less than majority stake and earn out over time or something. But yeah, it's a challenge. Yeah, maybe I'll just comment some on the capital markets, and I don't know how many people in the audience have done any retail investing in any of the cannabis companies, but you look at the stock charts in the capital markets, and it's like there's three humps. There's when Canada went legal, that got the markets all excited, and that goes on. California goes legal, got all excited. Biden gets elected, gets all excited. But then we're a heavy retail oriented market, not a lot of institutional investment in the market yet. So it becomes very volatile. So Biden gets elected, and then, you realize, oh, it's not going to happen quite that fast. And then people run away, and for a lot of these cannabis companies, let's say if an index there was at about 90 after Biden got elected, by the end of the year, they're down to about 30. So huge swings in the capital markets. So which makes it all the more tougher. And I think, at this point in time, a lot of money is available to go to back real estate. If you're a big MSO, you're making money, you can raise debt. People are out there doing hundreds of $millions of debt deals. But, if you're a social equity, somebody trying to raise some equity for a smaller deal, it's very, very difficult at this time. I think it's really tough market there.
It's very difficult. Allie, you want to speak to that? There are some people on the phone, I think, maybe who are helping craft grows start in Illinois, or other states may be investing. And I think it would be interesting, since this is a finance crowd, to talk maybe a little bit about the financials and financing.
Yeah, I'm in the thick of it myself right now on New Mexico, trying to raise, I won't say out loud, but a lot of money. And it's tough, again, no institutional options, you can't get a mortgage for the land that you want to grow. And we're, our operation is focused on cultivation, not retail. But, there's no, it's friends and family and connections. And, if you imagine that you're perhaps a social equity applicant that maybe, has a past cannabis conviction or has struggled financially in the past, and you're trying to stand up, a craft grow operation in Illinois, like, good luck getting funding. There just isn't any. And I have, I'm a lawyer. I have almost 25 years of law under my belt. I've been in Chicago. I'm well connected. I make a decent living. And here I am, really struggling and biting my nails every night and sleepless nights wondering, is this going to happen? Am I going to be able to raise the money to make this happen? So, that's part of the reason that Amy and I started Cannabis, because we all really felt for the Illinois cannabis community. And it's a travesty that it's been 2 years since these folks were issued licenses, and they're still held up in litigation. There's no funding to be had. There's 40 craft grow licensees that won in Illinois. There's supposed to be another 60. Those were delayed by litigation till at least March, and that'll probably get delayed again. But even those 40 craft grows, Amy worked with a lot of them when she was at Justice Grown, and she's still in contact with them, and they're struggling because they can't. How do you stand up a business with no money? It's rough. It's really rough.
And then plus, combined with the banking, we chatted about banking and the lack of access. In any particular state, there might only be a handful of banks that will deal. It could be credit unions, could be state charter banks. There are some fintech companies that serve the cannabis industry, but it's a long application process.
Yeah, and it's dangerous. These folks are transporting cash. And actually, I just read, I'm sure some of you might have seen this, one of the operators is suing the federal government because they just stopped them on the highway, and they seized all the money. And that's it. So it's a real challenge. It's what makes it fun and exciting that, it's fun. It's more fun and exciting when you have the resources and connections to be able to at least move the needle a little bit. I really feel for the folks that don't, it's tough.
Yeah. A couple of stories I heard about, and then, you can't even dream this stuff up in Hollywood. One was, there's a girl that I was talking with, trying to help them out in Northern California. And then they were expanding into Southern California. So they got a new truck and they got a new driver, sent him down to Southern Cal, delivered product, picked up some cash. And then he comes back to Northern California. And, you don't grip this in Hollywood. He runs out of gas in a small town, Northern California, right in front of the police station. So I kind of said, oh, what's in there? And so he had $1.5 million of cash. So we'll take that cash. And, you can't script that stuff. And but that happens. Another one was in Oakland where, they had multiple locations, and it was around the time the 20s were being changed. So they had this big, huge, hefty bag full of 20s. So they said, yeah, bring this down to our corporate office. So imagine a guy going through the cities, downtown Oakland, dragging a hefty bag. People don't realize it's full of 20. He gets into the office and they realize, oh, this is too big for our safe. Well, we'll figure it out in the next day. And next morning they come in, they get robbed at gunpoint. The guy has them open up the safe. He walks away with $30,000. He didn't realize there was nearly $1 million in the hefty bag that he left, and he did not pick up. So it's really.
Well, the dispensaries get hit a lot too. They get robbed all the time during some of the, the George Floyd protests that were going on in the city. There were some of these dispensaries that got hit, not multiple times.
You think the start of COVID in California, elsewhere, where you had cannabis and you had cash. So two things people needed to get them through the pandemic. So yeah, they got hit pretty difficult. Another thing maybe people don't realize is the size of the illicit market there. I mean, in California, it's still 70% or so of the market is still black market there. Any sort of comments about that?
I think it's frightening because once you're in this industry and you realize what that product can be if you're not testing it in terms of pesticides, in terms of mold and mildew, and all of those things that can happen in the black market, it's frightening to me how big the black market is. But the reason it exists is because of the taxation. So of course, everybody loves the industry because Illinois gets so much taxes from it. But if you put those taxes too high, you're going to force people back to the black market because the pricing is so much higher. The product itself, because it's grown outside and they don't have to test it, there are lower cost of goods. But I think the biggest thing is the taxes. And again, having seen what this product can have in it, if it's not well tested, from a quality standpoint, it's frightening to me. And I hope that the industry finds a way with the government to close that down. I would say Illinois is easily 50%. Michigan, when I was there, was crazy. I mean, it was just like, now all of a sudden the price would drop. We couldn't figure out why. It's because a big shipment had come in from California. So it's a major issue. And I think it's primarily because of the taxation issue, and also because there's a lot of outdoor grown product. Another one from Michigan, they have Croptober. What that means is everything's coming in from the outdoor grows before it gets cold. And of course that floods the market and that takes the pricing down. So it's I don't know what you guys think, but I think it's a huge problem.
Yeah, well, and Leah, Kevin O'Brien put in the comments the vape gate. I mean, that was most of those, vape products that were making people sick were created on the street and not tested, and they were cut with, other things they shouldn't have been cut with, vitamin E, acetate, and all kinds of stuff. And that's what happens when you don't have, when you have a thriving illicit market.
Yeah, you talk about the quality control. I mean, my previous company was an edibles company, and the California regulation said you had to be within plus or minus 10% for the whole tin. So in other words, we had a tin of 20 gummies. You had to average 4.5 to 5.5 milligram there, but you could have. But that means you could have one that's 1 milligram and one that's 9 milligrams. So you average out at the right number, but that's a hugely different experience. I mean, our chief operating officer, he had been at a party with 8 people, so they had a chocolate bar. They broke it in 8 pieces, and after about 20 minutes, 7 people said, "This sucks," and the other one says, "What do you mean? I'm buzzed out of my mind." And looked like all the THC had gone to one corner of the candy bar. So I mean, we had very, very stringent testing and quality because we want to make sure, each one was 5 milligrams, and it was to be a very consistent user experience there.
I put in a thing about the black market I'm based in Portland, Oregon. I work with companies all over the country, both with Marsh where I work, and I have kind of a side consulting business. So I work with a lot of different companies in all verticals. And obviously the black market in Oregon is incredibly, problematic. There's a lot of discussions you can read the articles about cartels from Eastern Europe, China, Mexico, you name it, that are operating and locking down a significant portion of the market. And in a place like Oregon, you're getting price per pound of outdoor flower that's trading at $200 a pound. And when you look at California, where it's floating between $900 and $1,100, depending on the quality, go to East Coast, Massachusetts, so you're $3,000 to $4,000. I mean, there's a future for that illegal to go back into the legal market. So I think with the proper alignment of a coalition of farmers, as well as some help from the state and the allowability of interstate travel. So if you look to the future, I think you could see a state like Oregon being like a producing region for the rest of the country if they can kind of redirect that black market stuff. But I mean, it's a bloodbath in California. My clients are under the impression that about 1 to 2 million of indoor canopy is going to vanish this year in Cali. So it's going to be a bloodbath. There's going to be a lot of companies that go out of business. So see how it happens, see what shakes out.
Yeah, you mentioned about California. So California went legal for recreational about 4 years ago, and it seems to be pattern in a number of states that maybe it takes about 4 years for kind of people who get their grows going, et cetera, and then eventually it reaches the point and they get to where there's too much production and more than the market can handle, and now it's got to be a shakeout. So yeah, we'll have to not very difficult market in California. Not sure how a lot of these smaller producers can survive. You also mentioned about metric in your chat. Anymore, I can't comment about that because that's also interesting in our industry is the tracking there.
Yeah, I mean,
I may not care, that you have the right number of raisins in your raisin brand, but we're very particular about to make sure that cannabis, no cannabis leaks through the system. My prior company, we hired a lab manager, and he thought it was kind of like going to work for Coors, and the comp program would be cash and hash. And we told him, no, you do not get to sample our product. Cash is not part of the compensation program. So I need to say he did not last very long at our company. But anyone want to comment about metric and the tracking there? 'Cause that's the real challenge for the industry.
I mean, I'll expand on my comment. My partner he runs the Portland. I'm in Portland, Oregon. The Portland Cannabis Marketplace. It's the largest physical marketplace, wholesale marketplace for cannabis in the country. I don't think it's matched in other states. I don't think it exists really. So they see a significant amount of flow from dozens of farms in Southern Oregon, and this metric data point is kind of an aggregation of anecdotal and actual, data from all these farmers that are saying, well, this is what we know, this is what's getting produced, and we know this is what's getting, it's just there's a massive discrepancy. And I think this is the dirty secret, is that most of this cannabis is what people are buying, from like bike messengers in New York City and Chicago black market, things like that. Obviously, you guys are producing your own kind of black market cannabis these days, but that's like the source for like the East Coast. So I don't know how it's getting out, how it's slipping through the cracks, but it's consistently, that's the number. But it shows that there's problems. And I think while metric and other kind of frameworks to kind of lasso the industry are seemingly going to be like Band-Aids once things change and there's interstate commerce allowable and all that stuff. So there's a long way to go. Yeah,
Danny, separately and shifting gears, Danny asked a question about do vault companies work with cannabis firms? So actually, that's what we used at my prior company is, we were first keeping it in a safe in our company, but our cash balances are building up quite a bit. We got to a high point of about $3 million in cash. And you have no problem with collecting the cash, but then how do you unload the cash? But we were able to find there was a company I'd converted a firehouse, and it was just a private vault company that would allow you to store your cash, no questions asked. And then we did find a fintech cannabis bank, and they would do the collection for us, and then they would deposit it in the Federal Reserve System, in essence, digitize our cash. So that took care of our cash problem there. So, I think we're getting pretty close to the end of the. Yeah, go ahead, Amy. Yeah.
I was going to say is, have we frightened everybody on the call or depressed them about the industry? Yeah. Our intent was, I think, to share information, and there's some really knowledgeable people in the audience too. Curious if they want to chime in, but there are many good things we've, I think, mentioned about the cannabis industry. But the complexity, as Jon, you were just talking about with cash, is just one of the many things. It's a little buyer beware.
Well, I think you develop expertise in this industry, and then you can be you're very valuable because the industry has grown quite a bit. Not a lot of people have that special expertise, and I think it takes a certain type of person to be able to, you have to, you never know what your day is going to be like. You have to be very flexible. But it's a great industry, very collegial. People are very open. You can't know it all. So it's a great opportunity for developing a network of folks. And talk about. I mean, there's a great Illinois Women in Cannabis network here that's been very. They even let men come into the meetings a couple of times, once in a while, pre-COVID. But yeah, so I mean, I'm blessed to be part of it. But it's yeah, it's not it's challenging, but that can be exciting too. You're never bored.
Yeah.
Well, that was great. That was great. We really appreciate everybody partaking in very interesting discussions. So thank you for that. Thank you, John, Leah, Amy, Allie. Very interesting. Thank you for participating and helping FEI out with that discussion. We'd also like to thank all of our chapter sponsors. We really appreciate your continued support. We have a couple of upcoming programs that you can make a note of. We have our career management group session, leveraging LinkedIn in your personal brand. That's on March 3rd. And then we also have our student awards night. We're excited to say we're going to be back in person on Thursday, March 24th at the Union League. Carl Allegretti, president of Arbor Investments, will be speaking about leading through adversity with courage, perseverance, and perspective. So please register for those events and let us know if you have any questions. Also, a reminder to any guests that are qualified for membership, there's a 6-month trial membership. So don't hesitate to reach out to us with any questions. Remember to complete the evaluation when it's distributed. And for everyone that is looking for their CPE credit, follow up with Susan Gidley. So again, thank you everyone for participating. Thank everyone for joining us and have a great evening. Stay safe.